Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour to be a part of the program. It is a free call. 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. Or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Joining me is my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
Good evening. We're bunkering down for yet more snow for the next couple of days.
You know,
how are you sitting?
You should have looked into that before you moved to the Dakotas. The snow is just part of living here, my friend.
I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that we're bunkering down again just because we've gotten such a volume of it in a short period of time. It's not the snow. It's the, up to my hip in 2 days amount of snow.
Well, you just be thankful that you're self-hosting everything, and so there's no reason to leave your house.
I am very thankful to be here.
All right, today it's going to be an exciting episode. We have Dr. Doug Milburn. He is the president and founder of 45 Drives. Also, their lead storage architect, Mitch Hall, will join us in the program. We have a lot to get to, so we're going to mix it up a little bit, do things a little out of order. First, we'll head over to the Linux Newswire newsroom and get the latest from JT.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
Red Hat has announced that their build of OptaPlanner, an open-source constraint solver, is now available in the Red Hat Application Foundations. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation has accepted Kubescape as its inaugural open-source security scanner. Kodi version 12, named Nexus, is out and adds support for AV1. The team behind GNU Cache is preparing their new 5.0 release, and they have announced some of the new features that they are adding. A new stock transaction assistance, and a new investment lots report for capital gains and losses. libvirt 9 has been released. The upcoming Unity 7.7 release will get a Unity X version with Wayland support. GNOME 42.8 will enable an atomic mode setting for NVIDIA cards and improves its Wayland support. The Endless OS team has announced the second beta of their upcoming 5.0 release. MX Linux 21.3 has been released, the third release in the Wallflower series. This release is based on Debian 11.6 Bullseye and ships with the Linux 6.0 kernel. Unfortunately for MX, the 6.0 kernel has just been end-of-lifed. While released in October of last year, the recent 6.0.19 update will be the last, and the kernel team is recommending that everyone upgrade to the 6.1 kernel branch. In other kernel news, a new privilege escalation vulnerability has been discovered in the Linux kernel, allowing a local user to execute code as root through a buffer overflow in the netfilter subsystem. Greg KH has also created a new branch to remove the Microsoft RNDIS drivers from the kernel tree. RNDIS stands for Remote Network Driver Interface Specification and is a proprietary USB protocol for virtual Ethernet functionality. The System76 team has teased a new Pangolin Linux laptop that will come with a Ryzen 7 6800U CPU, up to 32 gigabytes of RAM, and up to 16 terabytes of NVMe storage. And lastly, the creator Jacob Krantz has released an open-source smartwatch called ZS Watch and has shared all of the files and information needed for you to build your own on GitHub.
Storage, it is a frequent topic of the show. Why? Because everybody needs it. Everybody uses it. And 45 Drives, the folks there, they know storage. They provide you with the best storage solutions for your data needs, not the most expensive one. And today, they provide you with the most affordable enterprise-class storage solutions in the industry. And joining us on the program, Dr. Doug Milburn. He is the president and founder of 45 Drives and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah show. Welcome in, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Noah. Glad to be here.
Delighted to have you. Also with you is Mitch Hall, your lead storage architect. Welcome in, Mitch.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
I'm excited. So I want to start by getting your background. Can you talk a little bit about 45 Drives? What is the company? Why did you start 45 Drives?
Sure, long question, and sometimes I talk too much, but I'll try to make it a little concise. I'm a proud technical geek by background. 2 physics degrees, did PhD in engineering after that. A lot of applied research and pretty eclectic. Spent a lot of time doing research to make things and measure things over the years, and a lot of time building electronics and doing software and programming and the like. That's my background. I'm also have entrepreneur's disease, I guess you'd call it, and can't help thinking of the world entrepreneurially. I just love the whole world of entrepreneurship. Somewhere along the way, my business partner and I, named Steve Lilly, started a company called Protocase. And I don't know if some of your listeners may recognize Protocase. We started Protocase to be infrastructure to build electronics enclosures, computer enclosures, parts, brackets, sheet metal parts, and machine parts. And lots of people do that, but we made up a business model that would look after people who are innovators and people that are scientists and engineers. Low volume, really fast, not to slow your thought process down. 45 Drives spun out of that. And what happened? We had a company, I'll mention their name, and again, I bet you some people would recognize it. They're called Backblaze. Backblaze is now call them a cloud storage provider, but they're also a backup provider. They'll give you a little application that'll run on your computer, various operating systems, and you can keep your data backed up to their cloud. We met them it was before 2010. I'm going to go 2008 maybe. They were a startup in their kitchen, bootstrap startup, Silicon Valley, and they got us to help them design a very inexpensive, very high density, top loading storage server, which were called Backblaze servers eventually. They opened up their design, and we started into this by, first of all, building enclosures for them, servers for them, and our mass custom manufacturing that we have. And then eventually we married that, went out on our own side based on customers who bought these from us. And we married that with a very high speed electrical architecture. Different from Backblaze, who are about speed wasn't critical. As cloud storage, redundancy, even reliability was not critical for them. But we built high reliability, high speed electrics into it. And architecture we call direct wired. Most high density storage servers use multiplexing. So one hard drive shares multiple hard drives, share one connection into the HBA or SATA ports or whatever you're using. And we go direct wired. It was Netflix shared the architecture. They came to us to talk to us about building computers for us. And we married the Netflix, them and some other companies that talked to us in the same kind of architecture, married that with the idea of toolless, top loading, ultra high density servers, to come up with the hardware that we have. Started selling that. And anyway, long evolution from there into becoming a full storage solutions provider that we are today, based on open source
And compute even at this
and now into compute and into data destruction as well.
Yep.
So that leads me into the idea of, okay, we've got an idea of how you started, but I was kind of wondering who the target market is. When I look at your website, which is fairly easy to use, by the way, you can configure a server from a couple $1,000s over into several $100,000 depending on how much storage you put in there. So I was kind of looking at that going, I wonder who the target market for this is.
Yeah, it's interesting when you start up. Often, some people really start with a target market, and I guess everybody does in a way. It was very, very horizontal when we started. It was anybody who wants big storage. Okay? And when we first started, it was people. We didn't do software configurations, service to any extent back then, and it was very horizontal. And as we sold systems and see who bought, who needs high density storage, who needs high performance storage, and eventually open source, who buys that. But what's happened is over time, we've developed into, I'm going to call it 4 major market segments. And just to outline them quickly, one is in high performance clustering. So very large storage clusters running on Ceph, and organizations that and they're pretty sophisticated organizations. We have a number of them. Typically, the systems that they get us to build for them are $250,000 up to several $1 million. Biggest stuff is $5 million. Major clusters, tens of petabytes, and take just vast data ingest rates. We have a customer, I'll give you one example in that segment, University of California, San Diego wildfire project. They run a Ceph cluster. I think they have 30 petabytes of clustering.
Yeah, between I think 6 Ceph clusters at this point.
It's 6 separate clusters. Yeah. And anyway, their data ingest, a year or something, they filled the better part of that.
10 petabytes, exactly. And another one too, Vexcel, for example. It's not uncommon for a cluster of theirs. They do high-res imaging, and we've seen many, many times the cluster doing about 11, 12 gigabytes a second write, meanwhile reading about 7, 8 gigs a second, and that's gigabytes per second. So very, very high throughput clusters for sure. So
that's some stuff that's our geekdom. That's, if you're in the auto world, that's the McLaren or the Lamborghini customers, right? And they're really cool. We love that stuff. Let's go to another end. And that would be video. So video is a really important segment for us. The organizations would range from one person. We have customers who are one-person video production operations, up to some major studios. On the other end, a lot of mid-sized post-production houses. We'd have people, organizations that do internal video. You guys had New Spring Church on, great customer of ours, love interacting with them. They do their own video production. And the video production world, a lot of government, and federal government, military, and we'll move into state government to some extent, and municipal government as well. Municipal government, real problem solver. Municipal governments have a real problem. They have policing, and they have things like traffic light cams, body cams, forensic data, and they have all their municipal general file serving needs that they do.
You have to manage so many different types of data from day to day.
And municipalities, their IT people just die and go to heaven when they get into clustering. It solves, they suffer from something that we call server zoo. Where you end up, the organization start off with a storage server back in 1910, as my grandfather used to say, and that's got data on it, and they don't have budget to replace it, and then you get another storage server, another.
NetApp, this or that. They got all these different UIs,
and every one of them is, it's mission critical because they need the data for it. Any one of them breaks down, and it's trouble. And when they make the leap to clustering, we do all kinds of stuff with them, like maybe just providing backup or whatever else. But the ones that jump to clustering, like I say, they die and go to heaven when they do that. The mission critical is gone. All the forward motion, and their future path is clear, and they can become the old Maytag repairman commercials.
Well, Doug, one of the things that they love, and from hearing from us, is once we build those clusters and we let them leverage their old hardware and bring it into the Ceph cluster, they never hear things like that, right? We allow these other vendor servers to be able to come in and take part in the Ceph cluster to be able to expand it instantly once we deploy our hardware.
So great track in that. And then the other one's sort of general file storage, file system storage. We got a bunch of other miscellaneous users, but those are the big ones for us.
So let's jump off of something that Mitch was just talking about in terms of the adding the servers to, like, existing servers to a new Ceph cluster or whatever. One of the things that when you're talking about targeting a segment, one of the things that you think about is like, okay, well, how do you sell yourself? Like, what is your value proposition? Like, why do clients choose 45 drives?
Yeah, and again, that's going to depend. So we talk about that one on clustering, and again, we love clustering. It's half our business. Single servers, half our business too. Clustering.
How about I narrow it down for you and say, like, okay, let's take two of your market segments. So you mentioned like the municipality with the police or whatever, and I don't know, let's say marketing. Let's say the video production. Just give us a quick overview of like why those people might choose you.
Sure. Let me do municipality first. Hypothetical municipality comes along and they got server zoo problem. They come in and talk to us, and sometimes they'll just buy a backup server for us, whatever else. We got around to talk about clustering. And then they go, okay, so here's something you do with 45 drives, value proposition, 45 drives. If they want to move to clustering, the proprietary clustering, the big guys, the enterprise vendors, they don't have the budget for it. Okay? We're open source, open platform. So we're at pricing that typically looks like a fifth of the other options. So we meet their budget. Performance-wise, we perform every bit as good as any of the enterprise. It's open source, open platform hardware. It's just, it's tops performance. And then we give them flexibility. We give them a lack of vendor lock-in. So there's no promise, we'll get you a cheap system in here, but you got to come for service. We got you by the pockets. They're on their own. So we get to do ongoing business with them if we're the best value for them. So they absolutely love that. Flexibility, if they need a hard drive, if you're with Dell, for example, we have Dell customers telling us that they need to plug Dell hard drives into their Dell clusters, and if not, their warranty, I don't think they'll even work with it, that they actually flash their hard drives. Our stuff, completely open. You want to put somebody else's parts, you want to put somebody else's hard drives in it, that's up to you. You want to get other service done, you want to do service yourself, we're 100% good. You buy from us what you want. You want to connect your old servers back into your new cluster and reuse that, great, we'll do that for you. So it's a pretty unique package of price, flexibility, and performance, and it just makes a lot of sense for those customers.
And the last thing I would say is just our expertise, right? When it comes to ZFS and Ceph clustering, for example, I mentioned this before we went on air, but Ceph has made it very, very easy, made a very low barrier to entry to build a Ceph cluster and get a Ceph cluster into production. But the problem with that low barrier to entry is it makes people feel they have a false sense of confidence where, it's very easy. I can now handle anything. And then once they get into a little bit of hot water, they realize, oh no, I don't have a vendor backing me anymore. What do I do? And so that's where we're ready to pick it up for them, pick up the pieces and then hop right in with them and start troubleshooting and getting them back into a production ready state.
The fear. And let me add to that, the fear of open source, the biggest impediment, and we feel it when we go to sell, you get organizations, fun organizations, the Microsoft world, right? Most schools, their IT, they teach mostly Microsoft. Mm-hmm. So many organizations have Microsoft people and they go Linux. Mm-hmm. And there's a mystique around it because people know how solid it is. People understand, even from a distance, understand the huge advantages to Linux. And you look at for storage, Microsoft is not even in the game performance-wise for storage. And they know that. But what happens if I don't have enough expertise? Am I on my own? Nobody owns it. And as you know from Red Hat, same thing, 45 drives, you come along, we are your source of knowledge. We'll get you over any hump. We're there for you when you need it, and we can take the fear out. The proprietary guys always say we're there, but we're there more than the proprietary guys are.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between cloud and on-prem storage? Obviously, there's this push in the IT industry. You got to get to the cloud, The cloud is safe. You don't have to Okay, fine. Got it. We need to move to the cloud. How does 45 drives, do you guys focus on-prem? Do you focus on cloud? Do you focus on both?
Well, it's a great question. I love that question. And, it's funny trends, right? I think of The Simpsons and Moe and Moe's Bars. It was family restaurants. Got to get a family restaurant. The next thing you know, Barney and Homer are out in the street, right? So trends. I actually have a friend who's an entrepreneur. It's a security company, a cybersecurity company that's totally cloud focused. He and I talk about that, and I'm going, Darren, it's yes to the cloud, but no to the cloud. So here's the big dividing line. If you are a company, let me put some bookends here. Cloud works phenomenally if you're a small company, at least a small data company. You got 2 terabytes of data that you care for. So it's data storage is not a big expense, whatever way you do it. The one-time hassle of buying, putting in, maintaining on-prem storage. It doesn't make sense. Put it on the cloud, right? And it's affordable, and as long as the access speed to the cloud is good for you. Let's flip over there. Let's talk about video. We actually, one of the mega cloud providers, video people, buy stuff from us, and they don't put it in the cloud. Why not? Because if you have, like our company, we do video. We have 30 terabytes or something of video. Not a huge, nowhere near huge on it. But if you have 30 petabytes, my rule of thumb, I look at it and I go, a 20 terabyte hard drive takes roughly 50 hours to go down a 1 gigabit pipe. Okay, and plus or minus. And you look at that and you go, well, what if you have 50 terabytes of data, and what if you need it back? How long do you have? I got 50 times, so I got 2,500 hours, and it just no longer makes sense. And then on top of it, if you compare cost, when data gets large, if you have small data, your one-time costs, your fixed costs of operating a server dominate your people costs. When you're up into the 50 terabytes and above, the cost of cloud storage will dominate. And the payback, because we've looked at putting a model together and we've played around with it, that would sell on-prem storage with fast access and a lower price, but monthly payments. And we looked at it. And what we see is that the simple payback for having on-prem storage versus cloud, and this is for cold storage, because don't forget they charge for access. Okay? For cold storage is 10 months. And that payback for on-prem storage goes down rapidly if it's active data that you got to source. So really small data, you don't need fast access to. Cloud is brilliant. As soon as you get into big data, cloud is completely impractical when you get into big data, even to the point where some of the cloud providers actually, they do on-prem for their big data stuff.
Yeah, and then the last part I will typically think about is like, well, what's your tolerance for putting the other infrastructure in the cloud? Because if you've got your data in the cloud and you need to access that regularly, well, now you have to put compute in the cloud and you have to pay for that, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's all, excuse me, especially when you're dealing with a model like ours, I think, and I mean, our customers have shown it time and time again, the value proposition of buying on-prem is just so much higher, and it pays for itself so much quicker.
For large data.
Yes, exactly.
And big compute.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about your commitment to open source? It's clear that you guys can do clustering, and obviously you could leverage open source. Why do you choose to release a lot of the things that you do, if not all the things you do, into the open source community?
Well, it's brilliant. If you look at it, if it's about looking after people's needs, I just think the open source model is so brilliant. We human beings, social creatures, when we cooperate, just the level of what we achieve goes up dramatically. Competition's good because competition makes us cooperate better in teams. So the two of them got to coexist. But open source software is just so cool. I just think on a human level, that we get together, we have this need for software, that people have gone in and learned how to organize their cooperation so well that we can create projects like Linux or Ceph or so many other things where we contribute by creating some software. We put that out there, let other people share in it, and say, by the way, if you're interested in it and you have development skills, why don't you develop it and improve it? And that we share like that, and we all get benefit from it. And what you end up with is stuff that is often, it's almost always as good, and in many cases it ends up way stronger because of the breadth of the contribution.
Exactly.
And it's just we find it's absolutely amazing. So what we did is we own some of our stuff. And Mitch, I'll let you give a couple examples of projects we put out there and how people have contributed to it.
Absolutely, yeah. So we made use of open source software heavily over the years, right? And so it's only right for us to continue to give back when we're ready to develop and have software. So the biggest the biggest offerings that we've kind of open sourced and put out to the community is our Houston UI. So Houston is built on the Cockpit project. So when it was about time for us to really start looking into developing our own UI around our software or around our storage solution, really, we rather than trying to reinvent the wheel and completely start from scratch, we saw this incredible project that we felt was getting really underused, and that's the cockpit project. And so we really started diving into that and started developing Houston UI modules around that. So we've got a set of about 8 or 9 modules, I think, at this point. Now, 3 of them are core to 45 Drives hardware, so they're built specifically for our hardware, but the rest of them are very much able to be used free and clear from anyone and get amazing benefits out of it. And the biggest one that we see time and time again that people love is the Navigator. So it's the built-in file explorer. Yeah, it's funny. There's a funny story behind that. We were actually on the cockpit forums, and we saw a lot of people requesting time and time again, hey, it would be great if you guys built a fully featured file explorer inside of cockpit. And essentially what the devs came back with was, that's a great idea, but we're not going to do that. I'm sure someone will do it. And so one of our brilliant R&D engineers kind of saw that one day and said, I think I could do that. And our R&D manager said, well, you want to take a crack at it? And then within a week, he had a prototype up and running, and that was kind of history from there. And so that is being used very, very heavily. Actually, the last we heard, the Fedora team was actually packaging that up to be available on their repos, because we don't specifically make packages for Fedora. We support Rocky Linux and Ubuntu right now currently, and so those are the packages we build. But so it's nice to see that other people are taking up the mantle and seeing our software elsewhere.
So talking about picking up the mantle and taking the software elsewhere, do I understand then that these cockpit modules, which by the way are fantastic, even things like your user management and your ability to visualize, the drives inside of a server, all of these things bring tremendous value into cockpit. Are these designed to be used outside of 45 Drives hardware? And if so, somebody's listening to this, they're like, hey, I want to give Houston UI a shot. How do they get started with it?
Absolutely. Great question. So yes, the majority of them, and just quickly, I'll rhyme those off. The benchmark module, which is just a FIO wrapper for FIO benchmarking, which will also give you a nice graph report output at the end of the runs. Navigator, which we just discussed. File sharing. So this is SMB and NFS file sharing that has native Ceph support. So it will actually bring up, if it's a Ceph cluster, a Ceph file system, it'll bring up file layouts and it'll bring up CephFS quotas. So it will be aware of that. The last couple are identities. So that's user management, group management, lets you do Samba passwords, set your home directory, view kind of user login, logout behavior. All that is built in there. And then obviously the ZFS module. So I do have to say the ZFS module actually was developed by another team. We saw that and thought it was fantastic. Now, of course, we've adapted it and made quite a bit of changes, added in ZFS send, receive, replication into it, and some other things.
Do you remember who it was?
I don't offhand. I really should.
Wish we could give them credit,
yes,
but
absolutely.
It's in there.
But I am going to send you guys to our GitHub, where you will be able to see where it was forked. I apologize for not having that. And then obviously our Ceph deploy. So Ceph deploy is really cool. The name may leave some to be desired, because if anyone knows Ceph, the original orchestration tool was called Ceph deploy. So it is not that. What it is a UI wrapper built around Ceph Ansible. So rather than having to build a cluster through Ceph Ansible through command line, it's a full wrapper around that where you can do it all through the UI. Now those modules and even the ones for 45 Drives, you can find them on our GitHub page, which is just at 45 Drives. And also we have our own repo that we host as well, that you can get information from there. So I think it's repo.45drives.com.
And if I could add just a little tiny thing to the whole Houston UI thing, Houston was designed, we talk about targets for Houston. Houston was, number one, it's just to simplify, look, the problem, the barrier, one of the barriers to Linux in general is that lack of expertise with it. So you create a UI and GUI on top of it, it makes things easier. But we have this wide variety of people that use our tools and use our systems. Mm-hmm. So we designed it, really, really important piece of that is, some other things like a TrueNAS or the like, you can use those. They accomplish the same thing. They put a GUI in there, make life easy. But we said, what if you're an expert? What if you like What if you're a command line person, right? You can still get benefit sometimes from going into a GUI. But we made it to play completely seamlessly command line. It's really just based on manipulating configs and stuff like that. So you can have the advantage if you're an expert user, you can come use it where it's convenient, and then you just flip into command line when you want. That power and efficiency that you get with command line.
That is such a fantastic point, and because that is not the case, right? With TrueNAS and FreeNAS, they really want to keep you in the UI, and so if you go into the terminal, it really will not stick. Make changes that you make. And another really cool thing is there is a terminal module in our Houston UI as well, so you can start banging away in the command line, running commands, and then pop into another module and do some things. But then when you go back to the terminal, everything that you were running is just sitting there waiting for you, which is just, if you've spent a lot of time with FreeNAS, you'll know how great that is. And also I do have the name. So OptiMans is the name of the person or persons that developed the original cockpit ZFS manager. So a little shout out for him.
So I want to take a tiny detour, if you'll allow me. So we're talking about like the Houston UI, and we've talked a bit about Ceph and particularly clustering with Ceph. So I have two questions, both related to scalability. The first one is, okay, so Ceph tends to shine when it's running in kind of like a clustered state. In my opinion, it seems like it's overkill for a single server. So I wondered, what is the value of a single server? Like, do you run Ceph on a single server? And I guess this is geared kind of at Mitch. I want more of a kind of a technical answer here.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So we very, very heavily frown upon and try to keep our customers away from deploying anything less than 4 nodes. 3 nodes is definitely a minimum. But yeah, absolutely. Any of the benefits that you get from Ceph really are kind of disappear as you go down to 2 or even 1 node. Not that you can't do it. You certainly can. You could do some erasure coding and get some fairly good redundancy on par with like a ZFS or any type of typical RAID array. But yeah, the magic of Ceph really comes in when you have that high availability and the monitors forming a quorum and having all of your clients essentially being able to read and write simultaneously to n number of nodes. So yeah, definitely something we try to stay away from.
So if you're buying a single server from us, it's Linux ZFS. And ZFS is what we recommend, and we just think that's by far best bang for your buck.
Absolutely. And we do have paths for people, right? Let's say they do get to the point where they've completely maxed out a ZFS server and they're ready to try the clustering world. We have some methods to get them back to that Ceph cluster and then be able to migrate that node that was a ZFS node into the cluster once the data has all been moved over to Ceph.
So that kind of leads me into my next one. We didn't actually plan this for the audience. These guys are just on the ball today. But my next question was going to be about what makes 45 drives kind of scalable.
Well, I mean, look, that's it. A track, when we start talking to customers, it's the whole thing. We just encourage everybody to forward think and say, where are you today? How much data do you have today? What do you want to achieve? What do you need for performance? What are your files like? Do you have big files, small files? Actually, we just had a customer in today we were talking about who had some troubles. They had 2.9 billion small files on their cluster. So figure out what your workload, figure out what you have, and then look forward. And then that whole issue of where do you want to go? We always say to somebody, buy something with some extra headroom. Our smallest server we sell has 4 bays. We have an 8 bay, we have 15, we go all the way up to 60 bays. And then we have our solid state drive machines that are similar, and figure out where you are. And if you're in single server territory, buy something, leave some headroom, because everybody has data growth. And so you can grow by plugging things in. When you get to the end of a single server, you have a decision to make. Do you buy a second single server, or do you go for a cluster at that point? The decision-making criteria, and again, we walk people through this. The decision-making criteria on it is, I look at places that why you'd want to stay with single servers, even though they're a little bit more of a pain in the butt and a little less scalable. If you do an iSCSI, so Ceph is not great at iSCSI. That'd be one of the big reasons. The other reason, single server on ZFS, we can get you tuned to a higher single client transfer rate. So you think of throughput. We always hear about throughput from servers. And one distinction that we make, and I don't see it made all that often and out there in the larger world, when you say, I'm going to buy a server and it has X amount of throughput, and you go, well, what happens in a single client transfer? That's aggregate, right, of all my connections. What happens in single client transfer? It becomes incredibly important in video. And you just have certain applications where you need to move, data, and you want to saturate a 10 gigabit connection or, 40 gigabits or something like that. And if you want to get incredibly high single client transfer, it's also a place where I recommend single servers. And if not, look at going to a cluster. Good, we'll get you a track where you can go seamlessly into a cluster. Once you're into a cluster, it's nirvana. Life is good from there. You get your four nodes. You got a self-healing Ceph cluster. Time to expand, plug more drives in if you got slots. If not, put another server in. Flip the switch, tell the thing that the new server is part of it. You'll watch the data run down on your full nodes, and as it fills up on the other one, and it'll balance itself up, and it's good. You become on your way to becoming the old Maytag repairman.
Sorry, go ahead, Mitch.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to mention it too. A lot of times people will think, clustering is for people with a whole lot of data. And what we try to really get out there is, if you only have a small amount of data to start, but you think, okay, there is a possibility that this could grow, this could scale very quickly, or even over time. We try to get out there that you can start with a Ceph cluster and start very, very small and still have a fantastic experience and get that at a very, very reasonable price, right? Like we can do sub 20K Ceph clusters with 120, 150 terabytes of usable space there, where you have multiple nodes running in a cluster, and then you're ready, right? You're ready to scale if this thing needs to scale. But then more than that, you've got high availability, right? You've got the ability to have maintenance happening during regular work hours. You don't have to rush into the office at 4 a.m. if one server goes down during a backup or something.
IT staff with their feet up with a drink in their hand.
Right. So
no panic. No.
Yeah, exactly. So it brings a lot of extra benefits to the table. And I think 45 drives, we use Ceph in a lot of niches and a lot of markets that traditionally people think that's not a great place to put Ceph. And we've done a ton of work at optimizing performance for those workloads and the way that we do Samba and NFS, I don't think we've seen any other vendor do it the way we do it. I mean, we do have the ability to do standard NFS Ganesha, the way that Ceph would deploy it, but we also have a lot of different ways that we can do things to really maximize the performance that you can get out of a Ceph cluster when you're exporting it via additional protocols like SMB, NFS, S3, iSCSI, etc.
And so let me go back to that video niche.
Great.
Video workload. The agony in the video world. They got storage zoo and server zoo. So they got a bunch of servers and maybe USB hard drives all over the place. Store their projects on it. They load. They get a lot of data when you run an editing program. Big files. It's about transfer speed from your storage device into your editing right, and getting rid of latency. Yep. So that's the video world. So what do? They put an SSD, typically a SATA SSD, say 400 megabytes per second, and they put that in their PC or their Mac, whatever they're editing on, and they download the project onto locally. They edit locally, then they push it back up, and that's life for them. It's a real pain in the butt. But they get decent performance. It feels pretty snappy. We move people on, and we have quite a number of clients that edit directly off server. So to do that, you need 10 gigabit network infrastructure, which used to be exotic. 5 years ago, it cost a whack. It's no big deal right now for anybody who's doing. Yeah. And put in 10 gigabit network, and you put in a storage server that you can tune up, and you need high single client transfer. So we can get people, it's routine for us to get people to single client transfer that we can pull a file down at 10 gigabits per second. We can saturate the lines. So you think about that. I'm now loading my video into my in my editor at a speed that's 2.5 times my internal SATA SSD. So again, it's heaven when you get there. It's absolute heaven when you get there. Yeah, and it's just a great experience to edit like that. And you've left all the workload behind. Your filing is now, it's not a chore and it's not mistake prone, and you got snappier performance. So it's just wonderful.
So my question there is, if you're using a single backend, so you talked a little bit about how you might optimize it, but my immediate question becomes like, how do you back that up? Like, I imagine that becomes part of your conversation. At least the clients that are really sharp would be asking you, okay, like if I'm not going with the cluster because it's better, and you've explained all the ways that it's better, like how do I protect that data? Like, what would you tell them?
Yeah, look, get into the whole thing of data protection, and the minute you go to a central server, look, if you want to, it's a big part of what we do too. You got to provide safe storage, and how do you provide safe storage? Number one, you get rid of storage zoo, right, and get your files off all, a scattering of workstations and external drives, et cetera. Get them on a centralized server or cluster. Once you do that, and there's just some common elements to what you have to do: harden your root. Harden your root, so nobody can get in anywhere funky on it. RAID protects you against hard drive failure. Okay, backup is critical to protecting against a whole bunch of perils. I always say meteor strike. Never know when a meteor is going to strike. Backup is doing that, and physically remove your backup when you can. And then we're coming out with some really interesting stuff in ransomware, which is a problem. And we realize that we've been running ransomware protection around here. And in some interesting ways. Ransomware protection, snapshotting, intensive snapshotting, okay? And we've actually just in the process, we're just about to roll out server-side ransomware protection, where we've worked out our own monitoring and sorting to be able to sort through files and figure out what's been ransomwared and what's regular files. And anyway, it's a long story, and we don't want to talk about all the details because it's security stuff. But basically, we can pop a ransomware onto our test bed. We'll pick up ransomware in less than a second and shut something down. And then once you still got a few files damaged, but you know exactly which files are damaged, use snapshotting to roll it back. So that's it. Backup, and it's the backup strategy is the same as anything else. Get it, figure out what you need backup for. Get your backup server separated. Ideally, you're going to get off-prem. Snapshot, ransomware detection, and a plan to roll back on ransomware when inevitably you do get hit. That's what we'd say for data security, Doc.
Yeah, and then just to speak about how we would do backups on those single servers when they don't do a cluster. So we use ZFS send receive, which is snapshot-based replication, which of course, if anyone is familiar with the different ways you could do backup, the best possible way is to go underneath the storage in using actual block replicas rather than having to have something on the file system crawl the file system like an rsync or something like that, right? So what we would do is we would have an identical ZFS server either on-prem in another building, or in another room, or off-prem somewhere else. And our ZFS Houston module has ZFS send receive. Actually, it's called SnapZend. I'm not a fan of the name because I can't say it right, but what it will do is it will create snapshots very, very, like you can set it up to do every 10, 15 minutes throughout the working day, really whatever schedule you want. And then you'll set up a replication job task. So it will send the ZFS block deltas since the last time a snapshot ran to the replicated server. And then, of course, you've got protection everywhere. So you have a second copy of your server on a secondary site, and then you also have very, very robust snapshot policy to roll back any files that you may need to roll back. Pair that with shadow copy, where from the Windows side, if you're using Windows SMB, you literally just right-click your file, click previous versions, and you can grab whichever snapshotted copy of that file you want. So then you've got a really well built out, not only snapshot policy, but also backup strategy.
So one of the questions that I field in my line of work, and I imagine you guys get this too, is while it may be best practice to have two identical in terms of size and types of drives and stuff like that, is it required for ZFS send and receive? Like, can you, if you know, for example, that like my main server needs to have space because they use this for scratch space, but I don't want to back it up, can I have a smaller server and still do the snapshot send and receive, or does it literally have to be the same size?
No, that's a wonderful point. And no, absolutely not. So you can choose at the data set level which data set you wish to do your ZFS send receive. Or of course, if you wanted the whole thing, you do it at the pool level. But no, certainly you can keep your any data sets that you wish not to be sent to the backup server. That's very trivial to do so.
And older, slower is, it's
exactly.
a repurposing
you don't need
spot.
the same, specs either, I should say, right? Like a lot of times we'll have for the backup server or for the target that we're going to back up to, it's much lower spec, less RAM, slower CPU for customers. Unless some customers, right, they want to be able to spin that up at a moment's notice as the new production server, and if they want to do that, sometimes that's where they won't skimp on the actual hardware.
So you guys, I want to talk a little bit. So we talked, we went from the high level and then we kind of went low. I want to bring us back up to kind of a higher level and talk about the service model that you guys have, like the customer service model. I think that it's kind of interesting, and I thought you might expand a little bit in terms of like how you deal with the customer and how you serve them. Like one of Noah's biggest thing is he really wants to serve the community in the best way. Like he has a servant's attitude. And so when we were chatting, he and I were chatting about you guys, it seems like you have the same, like a similar mentality. So I thought I'd give you a chance to tell us a little bit about that.
To divert into company culture and people for a second. I really strong views in that. I'm entrepreneur by cursed nature or whatever else. Been a good and interesting life. But a long time ago, when I first started in business, I said I want to create a company that I want to work in, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it and how to create a culture and say a culture where people want to come to work. And I'm a believer, I won't get into reasons why, but all kinds of people come to the same conclusion. Your happiness life is not about your rights, and we need rights and everything else, but it's not about your rights and what you get out of the life. It's about what you put in. We humans are happy when we're serving other people. We love to get our recognition and reward back for doing it. But we've created that culture and looked at that. If we want to create a successful organization, I put this all together. We have a value statement on the wall, and top of it says, you don't work for the company. Companies don't actually have much money. They're just a conduit for money, right? And in organizing how people serve. So everybody in here, including myself, serves other people. That's what we come to work for. Our customers, number one, they pay our wage. And that's our big piece of our job fulfillment.
You connect your clients to your employees.
Oh, completely. Yeah, absolutely. And we teach everybody in here that we don't just deliver a product or a service. You deliver an experience. And by the way, your experience at work. Be nice to somebody, make somebody happy, make their day. They get happiness back, and it just feels good to go to work when you do that. So you carry that thinking on. There's a certain way that everybody interacts, and everybody just learns it, and everybody makes their own decisions. It's cultural, and it just carries. And it works wonderfully. And then when you get that, we get things out in our actual service model. So many times you get a vendor who sells you hardware. Somebody else might give you software services. You got a problem. They say, oh, that's the hardware's fault, or it's the whatever. Or then they both point and they go, it's the networking people's fault, right? And you go, and we've all been there, right? I don't blame I don't blame the people doing it, because there's truth to it a lot of the time. But we look at that and we say, there is only one good outcome, which is our customer gets back up and running and says, thank you. I'm really glad we're up and running. So our service model, we will go tackle just about anything. Now, with all the disclaimers, one of them would be, we know very little about this. The other one would be, say, we know about it, and you understand there's a risk. You might put some hours in and it might not work out. And it might be a fundamental problem. But we have a very, very competent group. And so many times we'll go in, well, look, just we configure and set something up for somebody. We know that we not only have to put in a storage server in that works, we have to help them reach across through their network all the way to the clients and the client software and make everything work together. And if we don't do that, we haven't delivered an experience and somebody's unhappy, right? Walk away and say, yeah, the server works, everything's great, but the client's not up and running. There's no value in that. So that's our fundamentals of how we look at service.
You know, in my experience with you guys, one of the things that blew me away is you let the customer decide when they have had success. So, and we had a client and they asked you guys, they said, well, what exactly does it mean? Like, you say you'll set it up for us. When is that complete? And your answer back was, well, I don't know. It's your environment. You tell us when everything is working the way you want, and then we fulfilled our commitment to you. And I almost fell off of my chair. I thought, wow, that's a company that gets it.
Yeah, no, thanks. We love it. We love doing it. It's in our culture. Our customers so get it. And it works so wonderfully. It's both profitable for us and it's cost effective. As I said, you can go buy proprietary enterprise and you're at 5 times the price. So it's wonderful for our customers. Our employees here win on it because everybody that works here, I won't speak for absolutely. I'm sure somebody has bad days at work or whatever else, but you walk in the place, people say, my God, the place is buzzing. It seems happy. We have our company stand up once a week. We got the whole company. It's getting bigger and bigger now. And each group puts together a little report. And I walk away exhilarated all the time from the stuff we're doing and the jobs we're doing for customers, the stuff, projects we're selling, the stories. Today we had the one about the customer who came in and they're having problems because their cluster is kind of grinding down, and they were finding that it was using up more space. They looked at
amplification.
They had write amplification and discovered there were tiny files and there were 2.9 billion of them. But we actually found a solution that made everything work for them. And I'm going, yeah, just love it. That's it. Customers happy, we're happy. Customers' bank account's good, ours is good, and everybody's having a good day at work. Doesn't get any better than that.
I love it. The ability for nerds to go to work and then go and serve people. Just a couple minutes left in the hour, Dr. Milburn. I want to ask if you could give me some examples of some cool or wow projects that 45 Drives has worked on. What are you proud of? What are you excited about?
Well, yeah, in addition to creating Nerdvana that we just talked about, what are we proud of? I look at it and I look at customer projects. I think I mentioned UCSD wildfire project, Allen Brain Institute. Brain scanning, brain research, and oops, I'm just getting a look there, and I'm going. I just never quite know if we're. Most of them I know we can talk about them. And our high performance people, we love those. So high ingest rate, huge clusters that perform at the cutting edge. We get to be part of that. True Nerdvana for us, and we're on the absolute cutting edge. Real proud we get to brag about it. But I also love when we get small clients. My buddy Ray J. Ray J, small video production company locally. I've known him for 25 years. This guy had the most brilliant system where he built this shelf, his own woodworking, that had I'd say about 75 external USB hard drives. And he had a system that was hanging cables and little addresses on everything, and he just plugged it into his Mac. And we transferred him over to a 45 drive server and changed his life on it. And we love that one. Development projects. Mitch, why don't you I'll give you a last minute.
I'm sorry, Dr. Milburn. We're the music in my ears means we're out of time. There's so much stuff that we could get to, and I want to thank both of you, both Dr. Milburn, president and founder of 45 Drives, as well as lead storage architect Mitch Hall, a guest this hour on Ask Noah. Thank you both for joining us. We'll get you back on the program soon.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. Love to see you again.
Yeah, we'll get you back. There's, like I say, much more that we could talk about. Again, music in our ears means we're out of time. Hey, if you enjoyed the episode, head over to podcast.asknoahshow.com. You'll find all of the articles and references we used to build the show, as well as all of the resources and references that these guys were talking about throughout the night. We'll see you back next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central, asknoahshow.com.